is because of such doctors that we still can hold our heads high and walk in society without feeling ashamed. So I begin, and then I would like to thank Dr. Jayakrishnan and the Trivandrum OBGYN Society for having me here and giving me this great honor. I'm truly humbled. I'm truly humbled. Thank you so much. So the topic for today was basically to how will the ART Act 2022 make a change in ART practice. I should have written how will it make a change in infertility practice rather than ART. However, the act is basically to change the thinking about how we should be managing and practicing infertility in the country. But then what we should try and understand is, why did this come about? What have we done to earn this? Why did the government have to take such stringent measures as to impose a law on us in order to make us practice properly? So let's just go over the history of what has happened in the last couple of years, maybe 2 decades now, and see what has led to this. So it was in the year 1978 that ART also came to India. We did not recognize it, but it was Dr. Subhash Mukhopadhyay who created the first test tube baby, which went unrecognized in 1978. And this was soon after the first test tube baby, Lucy Brown, in the UK. However, sadly, as is always happening in our country, he was unrecognized and he committed suicide. But then, later on, when the ICMR chief, Dr. Anant Kumar, TC Anant Kumar, happened to go through the files of Dr. Subhash, he understood and he realized that actually what he was saying was true. And the first baby was actually, had been born in 1978. Interestingly with gonadotrophins, and interestingly it was a frozen embryo. So basically it talks about the integrity, honesty and principles of the ART specialists of those times. Dr. Subhash of course suffered, but then Dr. T.C. Anant Kumar really took great pains to give him recognition then. So this is the first generation, some of them, of the ART specialists that were there in the country. Some of them are still with us, Dr. Indra Hinduja, Mahendra Kochhar, Sadhana Desai, Dr. Selva Raj, and many more, all of Dr. Sati over here. So these are the pioneers of ART in the country. And of course, the first decade, 1986 to 1996, saw very limited knowledge about the subject, scant media coverage, select IVF centers across the country, no IVF companies to sell equipment and consumables, and only international pharma companies selling the drugs. So ART was practiced with sanctity that it deserved as a pure science, honestly, consciously, and revered with a consensus. However, in the 1990s, a sudden interest began in the subject. Many went for training abroad and some trained locally within the country. Consolidation in the form of ART societies started to happen, and we had the birth of ISAR and later IFS. A single doctor-owned ethical practices, mostly in the private sector, grew. New arenas were explored, and this gave rise to new subjects like stem cell research, molecular biology, bioengineering happening all across. There were great rapid advances in the field of reproductive medicine, and it showed we had additional applications like ICSI, PGS, PGD, laser hatching, third-party reproduction, and fertility preservation. So, ART moved from the realm of just infertility to the fertile couples as well. So, in the 2000s, with the rising infertility in the country, with opening of the economy, India saw the following changes: career advancements of women led by late marriages, competition work environment leading to increase in stress level, rampant urbanization without the requisite basic amenities, and increase in the pollution level. So the above factors contributed to the rising infertility in the country, and the number of infertile couples rose to about 30 million. There was growth in the IVF sector. India proved to be the favored destination for medical tourism. More importantly, the Mecca for fertility tourism, and many treatment options were available here at competitive prices. So the IT boom resulted in the formation of numerous IVF websites, and infertility market reached a $5 billion in India. Hence, ART became a market. So from science, we moved on to becoming a market now. So again, there was a very interesting report by one of the IT companies, which actually changed the perspective of IT in India. And this actually said that ART in India was one of the fastest growing market in the world. And between 2001 to 10, IVF cycles grew at a CAGR of 27.9%, and the number of ART clinics grew at the rate of 25%. Media started to be misused, started carrying ART stories every day, blatant advertisements by IVF centers. We know all this, we have witnessed all this in our own practices. And so ART has become very controversial, and the ART specialist became tainted. From being a doctor, everybody started looking at us with suspicion. With all these advances, we moved away from ethics and science, giving way to new challenges and controversies. What were our challenges? There was a lack of organized practice. There were hardly any embryologists, hardly any clinicians. They were moving from one center to the another, and there are these roving embryologists going everywhere. No access to the best world-class clinical research. Then, of course, there were absolute challenges also within big hospitals, but because we could not churn out the same amount of money as cardiology or orthopedics, hence the infertility segment was looked down upon in large hospitals. Also, the availability of skilled and trained clinical manpower was deficient. So the scientific challenges were many. We wanted to improve our success rates, reducing multiple gestations, and shortage of gametes and subsequent gamete donation also. Health service controversies like access to services, affordability of services, and allocation of funds was a major factor. Therefore, the professional controversy began. There was lack of transparency, self-regulation, and surveillance. Social conflicts and controversies also began, giving rise to public trust in science, cultural and ethical concerns, reproduction and third-party gender issues. And so what happened is that the ART specialist changed course. Already ART was tainted, but we changed course again to meet these challenges. And what did we do? We started putting in too many embryos to have a better success rate. And this led to multifetal reductions and also consequent pregnancy losses. Similarly, because of shortage of gametes, we started to give gamete and embryo donations. Thereby, there was a very thin line between ethical practices and patients' desires. We were all being controlled by what the patient wanted, and so resulted in such pregnancies. There was nothing which is old in this country. Everything was just doing ART for anybody who came to us. The Human Rights Treaty of 1976 supported this, because everybody has a child to reproduce and you cannot deny those charges to anyone. And probably the ART specialists of our country agreed to that and continued to do what was desired by the patient. So this brought about more ethical questions and medical risks to us. And then the biggest problem that happened was the coming in of surrogacy, which happened in 2002, because India legalized surrogacy in 2002, and ever since then, surrogacy centers became very, very rampant in the country. They were very looked up upon, and everybody started talking about surrogacy all the time. There was media reports, and Rent a Womb in India was basically a favorite tagline. Lots of people started coming to India for this. So therefore, what was the reason for this? Because of low cost compared to the West, relaxed laws, easy availability of donor and surrogates, world-class infrastructure, fine expertise, tourist destination, and there was no waiting list. And to top it all, an ever-ready ART specialist willing to oblige under all circumstances. We just would bend backwards to do anything for any patient. So that is why many times there was a breach in the law. There was hardly any law, but guidelines. We were not even answerable to our own conscience. So that is what led to all these things happening. And so ART became a low-hanging fruit. Just about everybody started to practice ART. Large chains came in. Every gynae became a self-styled ART specialist. GPs and gynae referrals increased, and MBAs managing centers and large marketing teams came in. So the current scenario is the space is very fragmented. About 3,000 clinics as per ICMR in 2016, an average number of cycles of about 100 and 300, very few centers doing more than 1,000 cycles, individually managed, fewer are corporate public sector IVF centers. 95% is in the private sector with no insurance, no funding, fierce competition, cost cutting and competitive pricing with fabricated results to show each other down. With this kind of a background, ART in India unfortunately grew at a very wildly in the past decade. In our effort to make India #1 in medical tourism in the world, many of us had forgotten the science behind it. And there are so many who are still continuing to work ethically, scientifically, silently without making a noise, but the noise is very small. And the good researchers also are there, but they have not changed path and have still become the pride of the country. However, the erosion of medical ethics has become a very big problem, and world over this was a phenomenon. WHO held a meeting to look at the world ethics in assisted reproduction and found that it was not just India, but many countries, you see, did not have guidelines or any law determining the practice of infertility in the various countries. And so, instead of the guidelines which we were awaiting for so many years, we started looking at them from 2008, we were slammed by the law. It came now as a new act in 2021, December, and it came into force from January 2022. So therefore, the idea was to clean up this mess which had happened over a couple of decades. Now let's see what this act has got in store of us and for us, and what are we actually wanting, which should not have happened. It was started to regulate and supervise the ART clinics and banks with the idea to prevent misuse and safe and ethical practice in ART services. However, the silent features of the act are classification of the entities who are going to work under the act. For the first time, the ART clinics have been defined, and there are two levels to it, as you know, the level 1 clinic and the level 2 clinic. The level 1 clinic is for the postgraduate gynaes, and level 2 is specially trained IVF persons. Then we have the ART banks, which are centers where you can access the gametes, whether it is sperm or eggs. And then the surrogacy clinic. So if you have to opt for any of them, you have to actually apply for registration of each one of them, and it's a paid registration. Mandatory registration of all with fees at renewal, mandatory staff in each with specific qualifications, and defined functions and permissions for enactment of procedures and punishments. Punishments is something that we all must know. It is very harsh. Can I have some water? So basically, just let us do a SWOT analysis and see what is in this act. Let us look at the strengths of this act. Registration of ART in India, weeding out of illegal players and to stop unscientific and anti-social practices, and a better governance. What are the weaknesses? Basically, there are lots of ambiguities in this act. The implementation has been improper, and of course, it is not at all patient and doctor friendly. But then there are opportunities. Consolidation of practices, more scientific work can go on, communication can be better, and opportunities for research and scientific involvement. There are, of course, many threats, like strict data management that may go wrong, severe punishment for minuscule offences, as we have seen in the PNDT Act. Third-party reproduction can go wrong, and then it will become unavailable for those who really need it. So these are some of the things that can have happened with this act. Let's go over one by one as to what has happened after the act was enforced, and did we really see all this, or what is going on. So then, have there been noticeable improvements after the act has come? And have there been significant changes in the practice after introduction of this act? Let us look at the strengths. As I mentioned, the regulation of ART in India, it has begun, but not to that extent. Weeding of illegal practices, not at all. It is still rampant and going on. Will it stop unscientific and antisocial practices? We do not know. It has not begun as yet. But better governance, I would say it has begun. Better governance in the sense that everyone is as scared of the act as we are of the PNDT Act, and hence we are trying to look at it similarly and not doing any anti-act practices. However, as far as the government is concerned, governance is still lacking. So I would say some of it has happened, but lots needs to be done. So first of all is setting an age limit. And this I think is a welcome change where specific age has been mentioned for self cycles, donor cycles and the surrogate cycle. And in the surrogate cycle for the recipient as well as the intending women, because we know that for a surrogacy, a single woman who is either divorced or widowed can also go through surrogacy. So therefore the age limit for each segment has been defined very well, and that makes it simpler, and so we may not find this kind of a picture happening in the country again. That is a welcome change. And then there are mandatory requirements to conduct the cycles. For the self cycle, the most important thing is the age of the couple. They should be married, live-in relationship, single sex marriages. These are not allowed. Single woman is allowed to go through a cycle, but a single man is not allowed to go through a self cycle. And then we have proper consents, proper data entry, storage of gametes or embryos for more than 10 years. So these are important, these are absolutely mandatory set lines. Donor cycles, again the age of the recipient and donor, like I said, have been set. Sex and marital status of the recipient, again, is very important. One donor per couple, again, once in a lifetime. This is something that we are obviously upset about, and I shall explain in the coming slide. We are upset about it, but yes, this also has been said. Can be a known and unknown donor, but they have to be routed through the banks. Insurance is very essential, and affidavit also for the protection of the donor. We have to be careful that we look after the donor very well. Proper consents and data entry in both the clinic and the bank, and storage of excess gametes. Now, then we were talking about the weaknesses of this act, ambiguities, and this is where it is most important for us. Now, the level 1 or the gynecologists who are practicing IUI and want to be registered as level 1 are not very clear as to what is exactly in for them. Is it only restricted to IUI, or can they stimulate donors, can they stimulate patients for IVF as well, do the IVF themselves, or refer those to the IVF centers? There is a lot of ambiguity over there. It is not mentioned in the Act. However, we interpret it as them being able to not stimulate for IVF, only for IUI, because the definition of the Act describes it as such. It says that any procedure which leads to handling of the gametes and taking out the gametes from the body of the woman is to be done only by level 2 clinics. Therefore, the level 1 clinics will not be able to stimulate the person, which is going to lead to an IVF. So anything which is leading to any specific procedure should be done by that particular center only. If it is leading to an IUI, you can stimulate with gonadotropins, but if it is leading to IVF, it will not. So this is an ambiguity in the Act. This is my own interpretation, but I suppose the Act will sooner or later come out with it. Again, the identity of the international donors is not mentioned. How are we going to do that? Donors, both oocyte and sperm becoming expensive, and altruistic surrogacy is also very doubtful. These are ambiguities in the Act. Implementation is very, very poor. Health is a state subject, hence implementation by each state is done differently, and of course we are all going to be ruled by the board which is going to be set up over there. Complete is still not in place. Permission and registrations are incomplete and take very long for the patients. At the moment there is utter chaos for third-party reproduction. And of course, it is not friendly to the doctor as well as the patient, because we lack in understanding these ambiguities. And also, there are lots of permissions and registrations that need to be taken for anything that we wish to do, maybe even transfer of gametes from one clinic to another. So here is the Act also comes with a very severe punishment on breaking any of these laws, and that is also a very big deterrent for us. So here is the National ARTs registry. I took this from the board, from the website of the government, and you can see over here that 4,422 people have registered for ART clinics, and only 219 have till now been registered, which means that the implementation of the law is really, really poor. And of course, there has been no rejection. For ART Bank, 1,071 people have actually opted for ART Bank, which means they can handle gametes. But look at the number that has been actually registered, only 78. So for a country like ours with only 78 ART banks across, it's going to be difficult to procure these donors and sperms. Similarly for surrogacy clinics, 122. So basically the implementation of the act is very slow, and I do not know how long it is going to take for all of us to be registered under this. So do you think the ART Act will impact the adoption of orphan children in the country? If so, how? So look at the threats. Third-party reproduction is going to suffer. It's already been hit. Many have opted out of it as either completely or only surrogacy. And third-party has become expensive for the middle class. So with an increasing number of poor ovarian and testicular reserves, third-party reproduction is becoming a necessity, and if not available, fertility rate of the country is also going to go down. But nevertheless, for infertile couple, first of all, is really going to suffer, and that is why they will have to resort to something like adoption, and we do see that if third party is going to go down, then definitely adoption will increase, but then those laws will also have to be changed in order to make it a little more simpler for people to adopt children from adoption, from orphanages. So therefore, paucity of non-availability of donors, adoption may become a popular option. Opportunities, well, this has definitely begun. There is a merging of level 1 and level 2 practices. Many gynecologists are now merging with the IVF centers in order to practice both IUI and IVF, and referrals to both levels by undergraduates who do not qualify for any registration, and postgraduates also who do not want to register, they have also begun. So now we have clearly understood who has to do what, and therefore many of us are resorting to that according to the law. So this has actually begun, and I do see a lot of opportunity in this with all of us getting together to do the right kind of practice. Definitely there will be an advancement in science with very little opportunity for greed. So non-performing ART units have started to close down. Many have opted out of surgery, and many have opted out of third party completely. Centers have seriously started to follow the rules and maintaining the data. And in the incoming years, there may be a generation of great publication data from India. We may have our own data sets for everything. That is something which is very welcome. So is there a light at the end of the tunnel? I do see it. So what is presently lacking is that we do need a platform where our suggestions can be taken well and adopted by the country, by the government. And because basically we have a better understanding of this whole practice, and therefore we should be given an opportunity to see how we can practice it better. And more clarity is needed, revision of ambiguous points is needed, 100% implementation must be done, honest data management and ethical transparent practices need to be started, because we all know that there are lots and lots of cases filed against the Act in the Supreme Court. I think this is the first time that some people have taken this action, and I think it will show results. Why? Because in Chapter 6 of the miscellaneous ART bill, which is the miscellaneous ART bill, if you notice, provided that no order shall be made after the expiry of 3 years. So for 3 years, we can suggest to the government what are the ills of this act, and if they think that it is proper, there may be a change. It will have to come through the parliamentary party again, or the parliamentary commission, but still it is possible. Similarly for the Surrogacy Act, instead of 3 years, it is 2 years. So in each of the act, there is a place for a change. If represented properly, maybe we can see all these problems being sorted in the coming years. So with the law in place, it is expected that the infertility space will be more regulated. There comes, as societies, we need to do better and make our members understand what is happening in the law. Also, we need to improve the training that we are giving to our youngsters. So our positives are many. Majority of our ART specialists are honest, hardworking, and very sympathetic and ethical. So world-class visibility in the market is already there. We are much cheaper than the West. Our success rates are good. There is a changing perception of infertility practice in the country which has begun. And of course, I see a fully evolved ART or infertility specialist in the coming years, if not in 2023. So what is our roadmap 2023 and beyond? A well-regulated ART segment with centers of excellence, standard operating procedures across the country, complete transparency, easy access to affordable services everywhere in the country, revival of the patient-doctor trust and relationship, increased research and training, stringent monitoring, quality control and audits. So, it means the evolution of an honest, ethical, confident ART specialist as we were about 25, 30 years ago. So with that, I thank you all for having me here today with you, and I hope that this ART Act, when I come and talk to you next time, not for the oration, but otherwise, maybe we will have a better practicing ART specialist in the country. Thank you very much.